Hello there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as Ledev, and I'm here to talk about the recently revealed cards from Ravnica Allegiances. Spoiler season has started. We got a lot of new cards. I'm also going to use this video to recover on some of the old cards that got previewed during the holiday season. I did try to make a video for that, but the production qualities of it was kind of so I kind of wanted to reevaluate my opinion on some of those cards. Nevertheless, it's going to be a big video, so we got to get started. First off, it's Rakdos, the Showstopper. 4 in Rakdos for sits Flying Trample, and it has the ability that when it enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, devil, or imp. Destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. Now, this is a really good card. This feels like an arena card, like an MTG arena card, because I feel like it's going to have a really spectacular animation, and just that into the battlefield effect will definitely be good on spectatorship. Like a lot of people on the Twitterverse have been already talking about that and such. Speaking of which, I should probably close out of that and that. There we go. But yeah, this is definitely a very saucy mythic of the set. It's going to be a limited bomb for sure. For constructed, people having kind of flipping the coin on it. Pun kind of attended there. On one hand, it is a 6 mana, sits, flying trample with the potential of a board wipe. But on the other side of the coin, we have stuff like Doom Whisper in the meta, which does a lot effective for 1 less mana. And there's just also the aspect of this that unless you tailor your deck very specifically, you might accidentally destroy your own stuff. Though granted, maybe that could be beneficial. Maybe you put this as a top in a aristocrat style Mardu deck, so that you might get benefits if your own creatures die thanks to Rakdos. That's a possibility. But also just the factor that it can also, since it doesn't target the creatures it tries to quote unquote determine the fate by the coin, so to speak. This can destroy stuff like Harness Tyrant and such, or stuff with Hexproof, so that's actually really good. I think this card will see play potentially in Standard as maybe a 1 or 2 of, or maybe somebody will go full on Demon with like that Liliana's Contract and such and put this as another Demon to put in the deck. Who knows? It's definitely going to be a fun arena card, I'll say that right off the bat. As for paper, competitive Standard Magic, it's a maybe. Next up, a card that does kind of scare me a teeny little bit. Wilderness Reclamation, free and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. So, this is a 4 mana free enchantment, since technically you're going to untap the lands you control once this enchantment's on the battlefield, presuming the enchantment doesn't get destroyed. Ugh, boy, this card kind of scares me since, while people will make the argument that green and blue control, it's not much of a thing, Wilderness Reclamation is kind of a card that I think control players might keep their eye out of, because the factor that they can keep the tempo advantage, with the fact that you can, at the end of each of your turns, that you are going to have your lands untap, which then you can have it saved up for a counterspell. This just feels like to me a very upgraded variation of Taveri's untapping 2 lands. Being able to untap all your lands so that during your turn you can just play like a good creature or such and then untap your lands to hold up the counterspell. That is potentially very powerful. Now, in a meta with a lot of enchantment hate and even Assassin's Trophy in the meta, this card is kinda... I got reduced scared from it when I remembered that. So I don't think this card is going to be as powerful in Standard as I thought originally. Though it is a card to keep your eye out for, I do think there's some decks that will try the Wilderness Reclamation control strategy, just because for the factor that being able to keep your lands untapped during the opponent's turn to hold up for some very powerful counter magic spells that we have in the meta, that's nothing to sneeze at. So overall, I think this is a good card, but most likely it's probably going to see its play in Commander, no sweat about that. Standard, keep your eye out, I'll say that. Next up is another mythic from the set, the Ravager Worm. A free red green, so the Grill colors, for a creature worm with Riot, and as we mentioned before, Riot is a mechanic that essentially gives you a choice when you cast a creature. It can either enter the battlefield with your choice of a 1/1 counter, or it has haste. And the thing is, the counter goes into the battlefield. It's not like you can't interact it when you place the counter on the creature. So it can't be like if it's a free creature with Riot, you can't, like, when it enters the battlefield, lightning bolt and kill it if it enters with the 1/1 counter. It enters with it, you can't interact with the step with the counter on it. So, good thing to keep in mind. But anyway, with the card itself, when it enters the battlefield, choose up to one option. It either fights a target creature you don't control, or destroy target land with an activated ability that isn't a mana ability. Yeah, this card is really good. The fact that this can either be a 5/6 with haste, or no, a 5/6 or a 4/5 with haste is actually very powerful. And also, those abilities are nothing to sneeze at. The fact that it can fight a really annoying creature as a 5/6 is very powerful. But also just the factor that we have a lot of powerful lands in the meta, such as Search for Azcanta flip, and even like Thematic Compass flip, or even just the Treasure Map flip. The fact that we can use that second ability to destroy a problematic land like that and not have to run like Field of Ruin and such is nothing to sneeze at. I do think this card has a chance to play if a Gagari, or not Gagari, Black Brain Fart. I've been having a lot of brain farts this morning. If a Gruul mid-range deck or a multicolored mid-range deck is a possibility, this card seems very powerful in that deck archetype. Anyway, next up is a really peculiar card for Azorius It's Precognitive Perception. Free red for an instant. Draw 3 cards, and it has the Addendum, which is the Azorius mechanic, which means that if you cast a spell during your main step, something extra happens. In this case, if you cast a spell during your main phase, instead, scry free, then draw 3 cards. To control the present, we must master the future. A lot of control players have been iffy on this card. On one hand, the factor that it is 5 mana draw free cards is interesting. You are paying about as much mana as you would for a free card draw, essentially. And the factor that you can cast this during your main step to scry free and then draw those cards, that does allow you to dig into your deck pretty nicely. The catch-22 is most people, when they play cards like Glimmer of Genius or our current card in the meta, I'm having a brain fart of the name, Chemist's Insight, that's what it is. Mostly they prefer the instant aspect because what they do is they prefer to draw the cards at the end of the opponent's turn. That way they can hold up a counterspell, and then if nothing scary happens, then they can draw a card to get more counter magic in their hand or just more options to help control the battlefield. This card kind of turns it on its side, saying, kind of making a tempting aspect for control players to be like, you could just draw those free cards and hope for the best, or if you just wait during your main step, you can just draw those free cards and then scry. Which seems powerful until you realize then they have to tap 5 mana for that, and then they can't hold up their counter magic. So, are there circumstances, maybe if you have a powerful enough board state that you don't mind casting this and then just getting the card advantage? Like if you have a Teferi on the battlefield and such? I think if this card does see play, it's mostly going to be as a 1 of, maybe 2 of. I don't think this is like a full-on go-get the playset scenario. It's a powerful card, but I think there are better card draw options in the current standard meta, even though the scry aspect of this card is potentially very powerful. Next up, one of my favorite cards they revealed so far, the Spawn of Mayhem. 2 black and black for a 4/4 creature demon flying trample with the spectacle cost of 1 in black and a black, which means you may cast this spell for its spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. It has flying, it has trample, and at the beginning of your upkeep, this creature deals 1 damage to each player. That's including you, keep that in mind. Then, if you have 10 or less life, put a 1/1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem. Oh boy, this card's silly. Now, on one hand, this card is prone to a lot of removal in the standard meta at the moment. I mean, this can get lava coiled without a sweat. But I do love the aspect of this, that you can get this down as early as turn 3 if you put this in the right spectacle style Mayhem type of deck. That's actually really cool. And the fact that it can constantly just, at the beginning of your upkeep, deal 1 point of damage, which then helps you with spectacle cards, that's really cool. I like this card a lot. Now, it might be prone to removal, so it might not see as much play as people think right off the bat, but I do think I will want to jank brew with this card a lot. But it does safe to say the 2 factors that need to be said. 1, it can be removed by Lava Coil. And two, or even just like a really good Gagari removal spell, you can name your pick. But also the aspect of it is that we do have a lot of competitive flyers in the format, such as pretty much the Crackling Drake, even Niv Mizzet, so keep that in mind. Still, I like this card, and I think this is an absolute limited bomb. Next up, Skargan Hellkite. Free red for 4/4 Flying Dragon that has Riot, so it can eat it into the battlefield with your choice of a counter or haste. And it has an ability that it can deal 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Activate this ability only if Skargan Hellkite has a 1/1 counter on it. This card's weird. On one hand, many people are going to look at this card and think it's kind of like the Glory Brino of the set. And in one sense, you're right, in one sense, not really. Glory Brino was a ridiculously powerful card in the Amonkhet meta, was because the factor that it was a 5 mana 4/4 with haste that allows you to deal 4 damage to any target creature that's not a dragon. So it worked as both a semi-removal spell to help you control the battlefield, as well as a hasty dude. This one is weird because it's trying to provide versatility in the sense that either you can have the 4/4 flyer with haste, or just have a really big 5/5 that has a mana sink ability that is actually not bad. Like the mana sink ability to deal 2 damage to any creatures that you choose is a very powerful ability. Especially in limited when it can synergize with stuff like Spectacle and such, so keep that in mind. I don't know. This card, I don't know if it'll see standard play. The factor is, yeah, it can become a 5/5, but still it kind of goes with the same argument that I'm going to make with Spawn of Mayhem. It can easily get removed by Lava Coil, and there's a lot more competitive flyers in the format. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if this card sees play. It's just kind of... It's almost stale, I'll say that. Because the power level is there. The fact that it is a 4/4 dragon with haste, and the fact that it's a dragon makes it very powerful, especially with cards like Sarkhan in the meta, so you can maybe cast this on turn 3 if you're able to get a turn 2 Sarkhan. That's a possibility. Keep your eye out on this card, but at the moment, I'm just going to say maybe. Next up, one of the more sillier cards from Simic that we got, the Growth Chamber Guardian. 1 and a green for a bear, a 2/2 Elf Crab Warrior. Okay. And it has 2 and a green, and it has the Adept too. So if this creature has no 1/1 counters on it, put 2 1/1 counters on it. So with Adept, it can become a 4/4. Oh, and it has the ability that whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on this card, you may search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This card is pretty good, actually. The factor that it's a bear is just totally functional. People play bears constantly. And the fact that it has the Adept mechanic to make it later in the game become a 4/4, that's a really good draft card ability. And maybe it has potential in Constructed because the fact that it's an elf, and elf decks are a thing. Like, they're not as popular as many other decks, but it is an elf, so keep that in mind. And the fact that you can use it to search for another card that is an elf to help benefit your elf-like synergies, that could be potentially very powerful. Honestly, though, I mostly see this card potentially powerful in Limited because it's just a bear that can become a 4/4, which is pretty powerful. But on the other side of the coin, if we have any ways to remove counters from the creature for interaction, that's something to keep in mind. Speaking of which, we got the Borlak Clan Crusher, free red and green for a creature ogre warrior. And it has an activated ability to remove a 1/1 counter from a creature you control, and then this creature deals 2 damage to any target. So yeah, if there's any incentive to combine Simic / Gruul cards, this is a pretty good payoff card. Now on the other hand, it is a 4/4, and the stats itself are decent for a 5-drop, but the factor is if you can brew a very good limited deck with counter synergies and such, this might actually be a good tech card for that deck. Just be able to have a big creature, and then when you don't really need the big creature, but you need like a removal shock, this card is actually pretty functional for that aspect alone. And just even if you don't have that, maybe if you just have cards that you know that it's going to have counters on it, like let's say any monocolored riot creatures and such, then you could just remove the counters off the riot creatures to just deal the shock damage. I think this is more a powerful limited card than, say, a constructed card. I think people will try this deck archetype out since it is kind of an interesting archetype, but I don't know if it's as powerful enough to see standard play as it looks at first glance. Who knows? I could be wrong, but this is more like a powerful limited card. But still, it'll be interesting to see if this like spawns some counter deck where it's like you get a lot of creatures with counters on them, and then you try to remove those counters with the Clan Clutcher. It'll be interesting to see. Next up, we got finally another split card of the set, which, sorry if I have to make you tilt your head sideways with this one, I'll just read off the card. Depose, which is 1 in hybrid Azorius colors, so you can either spin white or blue, to tap target creature and then draw a card. Or you can play Deploy, which is 2 blue and a white. Both of them are instant, keep that in mind, to create 2 1/1 colorless Fopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Then you gain 1 life for each creature you control. Okay, that's powerful. So, is this a good limited card? Yeah, this is probably a very functional limited card because at its best, it is at the top end, you can just be able to get those Fopters and gain life, which is actually pretty powerful. And even if you need to, doing the tap target creature and cycling it is not the worst thing in the world. Like maybe there are going to be some moments where you need to use this as a catch save card to prevent lethal damage to you. So if you need to use it for that, it's fine. Still, I think this card is mostly potentially has very powerful constructive applications with cards like Divine Visitation or even any kind of like Selesnya, or maybe even make a banned token type deck. That is a very good possibility. I mean, the factor that Divine Visitation can make it will deploy is create 2 Sarah Angels. That is really silly. Also, this might even see play like in Commander and like Breyer decks because Fopters are always good to have. Who knows? I think this is more a good limited card with some potential constructed applications in the right decks. Next up, we got one of the more popular characters in Ravnica, which is Tedsa Karlov. 2 white and a black for a legendary creature, Human Advisor. It's a 2/4. And if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control the trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Also, creature tokens you control have Vigilance and Lifelink. While Kea is the Guildmaster, Teza waits patiently at the center of Orzhov's web of power. Okay, this card is actually really, really powerful. This is, as many people are making the joke, it's kind of the Death Harmonicon or Death Pan Harmonicon, in the sense that this interacts with creatures that have abilities that when it dies, which we do have a couple of triggered abilities that have that, especially with Orzhov with Afterlife, which we'll get to that once we get to the next card. But still, nevertheless, this is just a very functional, powerful card. It's a 4-mana 2/4, which stats are alright. The factor that you can hopefully get additional abilities with the Death trigger can synergize pretty well with some of the mechanics from this set, plus also other mechanics from the previous set that have, when a creature dies, this triggers ability to keep in mind. It also synergizes with, ironically, with a Rakdos card, which we'll get to. And then also just the factor that it synergizes with Afterlife, which creates tokens, and not those tokens will have Vigilance and Lifelink. That is really powerful. I think this card has the potential to, at the very least, we'll see Commander play. There's going to be people who are burrowing around this deck as we speak. However, if there is a catch-22 with the card, while the stats are competitive for a 4-drop, there is the fact that the Lava Coil is still a popular card in the meta, and, well, this gets killed by Lava Coil before you can say Timbuktu on a Bayou. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, on one hand, if there's ways you can protect the card, maybe you'll see play. It'll be interesting to see if this sees standard play. It is a fun card at the very least, I'll say that right off the bat. Next up, we have Seraph of the Scales, a mythic of the set from Orzhov colors, 2 in Orzhov, white and a black, creature angel. It has flying, and it's a 4/3, and it has the activated abilities of white, that it gains either Vigilance until in a turn, or black, that it either gains Death Touch until in a turn, and it has the mechanic we're talking about called Afterlife. Now, Afterlife essentially basically amounts to when a creature dies, it will create this many amount of black and white spirit creature tokens with flying. So this has Afterlife 2, so when this dies, it will create two 1/1 white and black spirit creature tokens with flying. Yeah, this is a very powerful card for Limited. The fact that it's a 4/3 flyer that replaces itself with two 1/1 flyers is nothing to sneeze at, especially the fact that they can either have Vigilance or Death Touch. That's really good. And with cards like Tessa Karlov to be able to, say, trigger an additional time and maybe get 4 spirits, that's pretty good. That's actually really powerful. Also, the factor that this might actually potentially see constructed play, because the factor is it is an angel, and with stuff like Lyra Dawnbringer in the meta and such, even Shalai, yeah, we might even see Black-White Angels be a thing because of this. Who knows? I mean, the factor of that alone does make the card really tempting. So, overall, I say this card is really getting limited, and it might see constructed play. The keyword is might. The problem is, the problem is with all these really cool flyers is going to be something that's going to make me sound like a broken record. Crackling Drake, and also just like Doom Whisper in the meta. So yeah. Next up, one of the more funny cards that I actually kind of had a good chuckle from, Amplifier. Okay, that's a good pun name. It's a 2 red for a 1/1 elemental, but it has the ability that at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards on the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Until your next turn, Amplifier's base power becomes twice that card's power, and its base toughness becomes twice that card's toughness. Put the real cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, I love the pun on this card. I love the kind of cute little card aspect of this card, how it's going to be amplifying a card from your deck. Is this card good? Not really. The factor that it's 4 mana for 1/1 and it can die to anything like a. Pretty much it can die to a shock. So, yeah, I mean, you might try this in limited just because. The problem is this card has two problems. One, it's just one of those, it's a 1/1 and it can die to anything. And you have to cast this first before you get the good at the beginning of your upkeep effect, which won't happen until your next turn. So the opponent can interact with this card relatively very easily. Also, the second catch of the card, which I think not many people are pointing out, is the fact that you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. And then you put the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, the factor is if you're using Amplifier to say, for example, in Constructed, reveal a Galta and then make this like a 25/25, which is hilarious. The problem is you gotta keep in mind, you're shuffling a Galta back on the bottom of your library, and if your meta is competitive enough, wouldn't you really just want to draw the Galta anyway to cast it? Yeah, that's just kind of... I think this is more like a Jank Brew card, and I think I might try to do a Jank Brew once in a while with it, because that effect itself is kind of funny. But this is a card that I think it's mostly going to see its application in Limited rather than Constructed. I would be surprised if it sees Constructed play. I mean, yeah, we're all pointing out that this would be a funny thing with Galta and Thud and such, and that might be the case, but I don't know. This is something I could see like Saffron Olive doing a Jank Brew of, if I'm being quite frankly honest. Next up, we're going to get to a really peculiar card, Mass Manipulation. Ets and 4 blue for a sorcery spell to gain control of Ets target creatures and or planeswalkers. Those who cross the Dimir find enemies everywhere they turn. Okay, so this is technically speaking a 6 mana take control of one creature or one planeswalker, and if you're able to sink more mana into it, then you can control more creatures or planeswalkers. On one hand, that is a lot of mana to get that ability. That is a ridiculous mana sink. On the other side of the coin, though, well, there are ways to generate a lot of blue mana, like Storm the Vault, I can think of right off the bat. And there's even like stuff with Thousand Year Storm, so maybe you can just like use Thousand Year Storm and then generate a lot of mana with using Pirate's Pillage. And then even if you cast Mass Manipulation for like with one target creature or planeswalker, do the Thousand Year Storm, you create multiple copies of it. That's something to consider. However, I do think this card is more going to be a fringe play card. It is still a powerful card in Limited, though, because the factor is, even if it's a 6 mana, control your opponent's most powerful Thane, that's still very powerful, especially in stuff like Sealed and such, so keep your eye out on this card for Limited at the very least. Still, the one catch is the 4 blue might be hard to splash for. I don't think you ever splash this card. You need to be a primary blue deck if you play this unlimited, so keep that in mind. Nevertheless, though, I do think it's a powerful card in the right decks. In Limited. In Constructed, I could see me toying with this in Thousand Year Storm because it is kind of funny, but who knows. Next up, we get another Planeswalker of the set, which is Kaya, Orzhov Usurper. 1 in Orzhov colors, black and white, for a legendary Planeswalker Kaya. It has free loyalty, and it has 1/1. Exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. You gain 2 life if at least 1 creature card was exiled this way. Okay. -1. Exile target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. Okay. Or -5. Chaos. Orzhov Usurper deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards that player owns in exile, and you gain that much life. I don't really want to hate this card, because this is a weird card. This is a card that I could see many people already complaining about it because it doesn't feel like the powerful planeswalkers that we've been getting in the past. Like, for example, like, oh, I'm forgetting the name. Like, Teferi is the obvious comparison, or stuff like, I always forget the name of the Izzet planeswalker. Oh, what's his name? Someone will probably remind me in the comments. I should know the name right off the bat. It's like, Izzet Viceroy? That's what it is. So yeah, it's not like Izzet Viceroy or even Teferi or such, or even Karn. But I do think this card does have applications for Standard that people are not realizing right off the bat. First of all, the +1 ability, to be able to exile 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Remember, we are in a Standard with a lot of graveyard interaction meta cards. I mean, for Pete's sakes, this +1 could just be like +1, delay Search for Mezcanta from flipping, and that's actually really powerful. And even the fact that we have cards like Jumpstart in the meta as well, so this can also target instant and sorceries you don't want your opponent to repeat, such as Kimster's Insight. That's something to be very considerate about. And even just the fact that we have Golgari Reanimator in the meta, or even Golgari Reanimation shenanigans, the fact that you can exile creatures you don't want your opponent to reanimate, and be able to gain life from that at the same time, that is actually really powerful. Heck, you might even play this against aggro to just exile a creature you removed from their aggro deck and then just gain a life from it, so to hopefully get minimal life gain to help protect you against aggro. The -1, I mean, we do have Llanowar Elves in the meta, so that is something to be considerate, and we do have decks with 1-cost permanents such as Radiant Fountain and 1-cost enchantments that we might want to destroy, so that's something to be considerate about. And honestly, I think you're just playing this for the -5 ability, and if you can get the -5 off at least once, I think you're alright. One thing that does tempt me about this card, though, is I do think this is a card that might be potentially make a Mardu exile all the things deck a possibility, like using Urza's Runa's Blast, using Lava Coil, using all the exile enchantments that white have, and just using Kaya as kind of like an ultimate to not maybe do lethal damage, but still do a decent chunk of damage to the opponent and gain that much life, which then maybe have life gain synergies. That's something to consider. Overall, I don't hate the card. I do admit this is one of the more weirder cards we got from the set, but I do think there's some weird fringe applications that might either see sideboard or at least some standard play that people don't realize right off the bat, so something to keep in mind. Next up, we got Judith, the Scourge Diva. 1 black and a red, Rakdos colors, my favorite. It's a legendary creature, Human Shaman. Other creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. At the end of the show, she stands alone on the stage, brilliant with blood. Now, this one is first thing that I thought of right at the bat when I saw this card and also this card. It's like, wow, maybe we can make Mardu Aristocrats a thing. Just the fact that we have Teysa and Judith. it kind of synergizes well together, especially the factor that if Tesa's on the field when she's on the field and a creature dies, being able to deal 2 damage to any target, that's actually really powerful. But also just the factor that even it by herself, she is actually a pretty decent aggro card. The factor that she buffs up your creatures, and whenever one of those creatures die, you can still use it to deal damage to something. It helps with Spectacle, which is nice, and also just overall a really decent top end to an aggro deck. Yeah, it's a 2-2, so it's not like the best top end, but just for those little abilities alone and the fact that it acts like a lord in a sense to get your creatures +1, I like this card a lot. This card I do think has potential to see play in a Rakdos aggro deck, no sweat about it. Be prepared, you're going to see Judith a lot. Next up, one of the last Planeswalkers we've seen, we still have to see the other one, which is in Gagari. No, not Gagari. Why am I saying Gagari every time I mean Gru? We still need to see the Gruul Planeswalker, which is Domi Raid, so we haven't seen him yet, but we have seen the Azorius Planeswalker, which is Dovin, Grand Arbiter. 1 blue and a white for a legendary Planeswalker Dovin. And it has a loyalty count of 3, and it has the abilities of +1 until in a turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player. So pretty much if you're attacking with 3 creatures, it triggers twice, keep that in mind. Or triggers 3 times. Put a loyalty counter on Dovin Grand Arbiter. Okay. It has -1. Create a 1/1 colorless Falter artifact creature token with flying. You gain 1 life. That's cool. And then -7. Look at the top 10 cards of your library. Put 3 of them into your hand. And the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order? Wait, what? Okay. First thing I'm going to say right off the bat. I am legitimately grateful that when they had the chance of me needing to make an Azorius Planeswalker, that they decided to not go with making another control Planeswalker. I mean, the fact that we had 2 control-style Planeswalkers, including one of them being Teferi in the meta, and both of them could have been potentially very powerful, that could have potentially made the meta a little bit obnoxious. So I'm grateful they kind of not went with the control approach, but went with the, hey, let's actually make more a creature Azorius Planeswalker, which this is what it is. This is a very heavily incentivized creature-oriented Planeswalker. The fact that it has the +1 that can allow you to get multiple loyalty counters if you deal combat damage to the opponent, so it's kind of more aggro-based. The fact that it's -1 still protects itself, and then you gain a life. And then just the -7 itself is very powerful to be able to restock your hand to refill the battlefield. That is really good. Yeah, I am just... This card... One of the archetypes that have been played in the past that people tried out was Blue-White Historic. And I do feel like this is secretly a card that Blue-White Historic, which was mostly a tempo aggro deck, kinda needed. It might even see play as a splash of in mono blue tempo, just the factor that you can create Fopters or even just be able to, when you're dealing combat damage, still get an extra incentive and being able to refill your hand with the -7. That's just really good. I think this card has a chance to see play in constructive meta. It's just, I feel like that ability alone is something to sneeze at. Nothing to sneeze at, especially in the proper mid-range to even aggro-based decks. And I can't stress this enough. I am legitimately grateful they decided to go with the approach of just being able to just make a creature-oriented Planeswalker rather than a control-oriented Planeswalker. And thank you, Wizard of the Coast. I appreciate that a ton. Next up, Biomancer's Familiar. Green and a blue for a creature mutant. And it's a 2/2, which has activated abilities of creatures you control, costs 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana in an ability cost to activate to less than 1 mana. And then it has a tap ability that the next time a target creature adapts its turn, it adapts as still had no +1/+1 counters on it. So, we got Training Grounds on a bear. That is really good. The factor it makes Adept potentially very powerful is a limited mechanic as well, especially the fact that we can make it cost cheaper thanks to Biomancer's Familiar, and the fact that it itself interacts with Adept in the sense that we could put more counters on stuff once even we already activated a creature with Adept, so that we can actually make it more bigger. That is very powerful. I do even think this might actually see some potential constructed play, because we do have some interesting interactive, like, activate abilities that reducing the cost of them might actually make this card potentially very powerful. Like, I'm thinking stuff like Lazav, so maybe like a Sultai, Graveyard Matters deck where you use Lazav and Biomancer's Familiar to try to get more higher power creatures out very early. That's something to consider. It's definitely something I'm going to be tempted to brew around. I'll say that right off the bat. But it's kind of a pretty simple card. It's a card that I think will see limited play, no sweat about that. It's a bear that just has a lot of upside. And also just the factor in Constructed, those two interactive abilities, the factor that it can help adapt an additional time on a creature, and the factor that it's training grounds, that's really good. I think you'll see play, no sweat about that. Next up, Deputy of Detention. 1 in Azorius colors, blue and white, for a Vidalcan Wizard. It's a 1/3 that, when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls and all other non-land permanents that player controls with the same name as that permanent until Deputy of Detention leaves the battlefield. So, as many people pointed out, this is Detention Spear on a stick, so yeah, and that's pretty much what it is. It's Detention Spear on a stick. It's a Vidalcan Wizard, which, gratefully, it's not a human wizard, because humans in Modern did not need more power. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. But yeah, the factor is, this is still a powerful card. Detention Spear has been a powerful card in Standard, and this card has potential to see a lot of play. Now, the catch is, it is a creature, so it is prone to a lot of removal in the meta, so keep that in mind. But I still think this is just a decent sideboard option for Azorius control decks, especially if they're going against token-based matchups. Because all you have to do then is just target a token that you find problematic, and you remove all the tokens. Like, this is a good counter to, say, History of Benalia or something like that. Or even, like, tokens like Sapling tokens or Night tokens and such. So yeah, I think just, or even with Afterlife, if Afterlife becomes popular enough, this can help hate out Spirit tokens. So yeah, I think for that alone, that makes the card very powerful. And if you can attach this or be... It is a wizard, so with stuff like the Bond in the meta, and maybe even cards like, say, Arcane Adaptation? Who knows? This card might see more play, or even with Helm of the Host. Helm of the Host with this is hilarious, now coming to think of it. I think this card will see play in sideboard, definitely. Might see main board play if token strategies are popular enough, but we have to wait and see on that. Next up, one of the really cool cards they provided from the set, Sphinx of Foresight. 2 blue and a blue for a 4/4 flyer. You'll just pay those stats decent enough. It's a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. That's good enough. However, for a flyer even, however, it has, you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, scry free at the beginning of your first upkeep, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1 while this is on the battlefield. Wow, this card is push. This card is a... This card is actually a really cool design card. I think this is their homage to the Leyline cycle that we originally had in like the original Ravnica set. This is definitely an homage to that, and this card is just a really good homage card. The fact that it's a 4 mana 4/4 flyer, you will pay those stats for limited, no sweat about that, or even in constructed, even though we are with Lava Coil. But even then, it still has that really nifty ability that if you can reveal this from your starting hand to be able to scry free, and if you have multiple copies to scry free multiple times, that can help smooth out your beginning early game, and that power is nothing to sneeze at. The factor that you can hopefully smooth out your beginning game, and even like if you're on the mulligan, then you can scry 1 and then scry free if you reveal this. Just that ability for deck manipulation for early game is nothing to sneeze at. I think this will see play in Constructed. I would be surprised if it didn't. Just that ability alone is nothing to sneeze at. And I really hope this is a cycle of cards. Like, hopefully we get a blue one and a green one and such. I can see them not doing that because if this is the blue one, I'm kind of scared to see the other colors if they go with this cycle. We'll wait and see, but overall, great design card. It's a limited bomb, and it will probably see constructed play. Next up, these ones I'm going to go through really quick because these ones are kind of like cycles we know that are going to be in the set. We got the guild gates back, which are essentially gates a variety of the guild's colors, Azorius, Rule, etc., etc. And they have alternate art, essentially, that has really cool flavor text. I say if you have a chance, go online and check the flavor text on some of these cards. They're actually really cool. But we got the Azorius, we got the Orzhov, we got the Rakdos, we got the Gruul, and we got the Simic. We also got Lockets are coming back again, which, as people know, these are mana rocks that were in the original Ravnica Guilds of Ravnica. And what they basically amount to is the 3 mana rocks that you can spend for a hybrid mana of any color to sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. We got the Azorius, we got the Orzhov, we got the Rakdos, we got the Gruul, and we got the Simic. And just a quick, another cycle that we knew was going to be in the set, but now we've seen them. Let me get to them. We know the Shocklands are coming back, which are in the Guild colors. So we got Breeding Pool, we got Stomping Ground, we got Blood Crypt, we got Godless Shrine, and we got Hallowed Fountain. As many people know, Shocklands are very powerful cards, especially they see a lot of play in Modern and other formats. And there will be a very powerful format in Standard as well, especially with the current checklands we have. So, yeah, these will see constructed play. No sweat about that. Moving on. Next up, we get another Mythic of the set, and this one is actually pretty funny. It's the Hydroid Krasis. It's green and a blue, so Simic colors, for a Jellyfish Hydra Beast. Okay, that creature type alone is amazing. And it has, when you cast this spell, you gain half its life and draw half its cards. Round down each time. It's a flying and trample, so trample. And it enters the battlefield with its +1/+1 counters on it. So, to put this in perspective, if you cast this for 4 mana, you will gain 1 life and draw 1 card and have a 4/4 flying trample. That's not bad. Now, let's say you get this to up to 6 mana. Then you draw 2 cards and then gain 2 life and have a 6/6 flying trample. That's very powerful. And this obviously scales up. The more mana you put in it, the more powerful it becomes. I think this card is definitely a potential limited bomb. The factor that you can get the card draw and also the life gain, and the factor you get a big flyer out of it. What also makes this a really cool design card is the factor that you could still get the card draw and the life gain even if the spell is countered. Because it's when you cast the spell, it's not when the creature enters the battlefield. So, if someone, say, has counter magic and counters the spell, don't worry, you still will get your card draw and life gain, which is really cool to see in Simic mechanics. Like, they were encouraging that aspect of it. Overall, I do think this card will see limited play, no sweat. As for Constructed, it depends on if we get a really good ramp deck in the meta. If we get a very powerful ramp deck in the meta, I could see a potential for this card seeing play, because the factor is being able to restock your hand and life gain is very powerful. However, it's kind of the same thing like I'm going to say with all the unique flyers in this set. We still have to deal with the likes of Crackling Drake and also Doom Whisper and such, so keep that in mind. And also Lava Coil, so you really just want to cast this, honestly, at 6 mana rather than 4. And can you play 6 mana in this current meta? We'll wait and see. Next up, we're going to cover some of the cards that have been revealed in the past during the holidays, which in this case, it's Absorb. A reprint, white, blue for an instant, counter target spell, you gain free life. Will this replace, say, it's a counterspell, so you gotta keep that in mind. The question is, will this counterspell replace stuff like Sabotage in the meta? Probably not, but still, the factor that it is life gain could help you if you need a life gain against, like, aggro-based decks, so that's something to consider. One thing, though, that people are considering is this is the first time this card's going to be legal in Modern, and most people are speculating that this will see Modern play a lot, to the point that even the price spiked for the Legendary, or whatever set this originally was printed from. I'm having a brain fart. Like, the original foils of this, from its original print, are, like, going up to, like, $50, I think, or some shtick like that. Because a lot of people are speculating that it might see Modern play a lot, which it has the potential, definitely, especially in the Jeskai control decks that are popular in the meta. Overall, though, I think this card has potential in Standard. For Limited, I don't think you'll be happy to pull this as a rare, but I don't think you'll be totally mad at it. At worst, it's a counterspell that allows you to gain some life. That's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's definitely not a pack one, pick one. It's more like, if you're going to Azorius and then you see this, then you probably pick it up. In Steel, you'll probably feel bad playing this, unless you're playing the Azorius, like, pre-package or such, so we'll wait and see. Now we're going to cover some of the older cards that I wasn't able to catch up with due to the holiday shenanigans, so let's get to those. One of them is a split Simic card, which is Incubation, Incongruity. Incubation. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, which is 1 green or 1 blue for that ability at sorcery. Then we have an instant one, which is Incongruity, which is 1 in Simic, so a free cost instant spell. The exile target creature. That creature's controller creates a free green frog lizard creature token. Yeah, this card's good. This card is really good. I think many people are underestimating the incubation side of this card. Like, most people are just excited by the incongruity side, especially the fact that you can exile target creature, which in Simic, which we haven't really seen a really good removal spell in Simic. So the fact that we got this is actually really good. And the fact that it exiles target creature, which helps against Archlight Phoenix and such, that's nothing to sneeze at. But I think many people are pointing that out, but I do think the incubation side does need to be worth considering, because the factor is it gives blue now the ability to access a creature-like tutor spell. We usually only see this ability in green, but now blue has access to this, which there are some very powerful blue creatures to be considerate about, and being able to use incubation to tutor for them from your library is nothing to sneeze at. Overall, this is a very powerful uncommon from Ravnica Allegiances. Probably one of my favorite uncommons from the set. It's just really good. Don't underestimate this card. This card will see constructed play. Next up, Sphinx's Insight. 2 white and a blue for draw 2 cards, and Addendum. If you cast a spell during your main phase, you may gain 2 life. Or you gain 2 life. It's not a may. With cards like Chemistry Insight in the meta, I don't think this will see play. This will still see play, obviously, in Limited if you need a card draw spell. No sweat about that. But in stuff like Constructed, we already have a lot of better draw spells that even been revealed so far, and even stuff that's already been played in the meta like Chemister's Insight, so I don't think so. Who knows? Maybe, but I highly doubt it. But still, decent limited card. And in Pauper, there are better draw spells, let's be frank. Next up, we have Emergency Powers, which is a 7 mana instant, 5 in Azorius colors. For each player, shuffles their hand in graveyard into the library, then draw 7 cards, exile this card. Then has Addendum. If you cast a spell during your main phase, you may put a permanent card with converted mana costs 7 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. Okay, that's scary. Okay, now let's get this out of the way. Yes, this costs a lot of mana. This costs a really lot of mana, which might be potentially very hard to cast in the current standard meta. However, if a ramp deck occurs that can make this possible, this card has some potential very powerful applications. I mean, the factor is in control builds, if you're able to, at the end of the opponent's step, just restock your hand with control spells and such, yes, you do have to pay for the aspect that your opponent will also have spells as well in their hand since they're reshuffling their graveyard in hand. You got to keep that in mind, but if you tailor your deck right enough that you're willing to interact with the cards that they draw, that should not be as much as a problem as people will say right off the bat. Also, if you decide to just cast it during your turn, hey, you get a free 7-cost permanent. And with cards that be able to untap lands at the end of your turn, gee, I don't know, which one am I thinking about? Being able to say, I don't know, being able to untap your lands at the beginning of your end step, so then you still have 7 mana to hold up for control magic. Yeah, maybe we're going to see Bant be a thing. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe so. On the other hand, yeah, it is too high cost. I do think this is an interesting limited card at the very least, and it might see some fringe constructed play, especially in some drinking brews. But it is a fun card. It's a nice story spotlight card. Like, we all know it's foreshadowing that Nicol Bolas is coming to town, so we'll wait and see if it's in this set or in the next set. Excuse me there. Anyway, getting on through the last few cards. Next up is Frenzied Errants, 2 red and green for a free Riot with Trample, and has the activate ability for 6 mana to get +3 until end of turn. Honestly, this is more just a really good limited card. That's really the best thing to say about it. I don't think this will see constructed play. It's just a great limited card. Now, the card that will potentially see constructed play is Gruul Spellbreaker. 1 green and a red for a creature ogre warrior with Riot. So it can either be a free haste or 4/4. And it has trample. Oh, and it's as long as your turn, you and Gruul Spellbreaker have hexproof. Wow, that is potentially very powerful. Yeah, this card might actually help the Gruul deck be a theme, even like a Gruul mid-range deck, because the fact is, what makes the majority of aggro-based decks have problems in the current meta is hate cards like, say, Settle the Wreckage, which targets the opponent, and then when it targets the opponent, they have to exile all their cards, and then it gets shuffled into their... and then they have to go get lands and such. But the factor that when this is on the battlefield, you have hexproof, so they can't Settle the Wreckage you, that is very powerful in the right decks. This card is really good. Like, the fact that it can be a free with trample for free mana, decent. And the fact that it can be a 4/4 without trample is very decent as well. Now, yeah, everything applies. It still can be easily removed in the meta. Keep that in mind, especially since... Now, granted, it can't be removed on your turn, but when it's the opponent's turn, there is a lot of variety of removal spells in the meta. Still, though, keep your eye out on this card. I do think this card will see more constructed play than people will take at first glance. Next up, we get a really good Rakdos card, which is Bedevil. 2 black and a red for an instant spell to destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. And the flavor text, it's easy to get taken in by the spectacle, to enjoy a bit of naughty amusement, but make no mistake, the cult of Rakdos is a danger. And this is from Tajik, which, as people know, Tajik was a Boros legendary creature in the previous set, so nice flavor text there. Overall, though, yeah, this card's really good. It's a unconditional removal on either an artifact, creature, or planeswalker at instant speed. This will see standard play, no sweat about it. Most likely you'll see play in chromatic black control, just the fact that you can destroy those creatures very quickly, very easily, and even the versatility of being able to destroy other stuff like problematic artifacts, or even a problematic planeswalker at instant speed is very powerful. There's even people speculating that this might also see modern play. It'll be interesting to see if that's the case. We'll fight and find out. But overall, this card is good. You'll be happy to play this card if you get hold of it. And also Seb McKinnon art, which is really, really good Seb McKinnon art. Next up, Homunculus. 1 green and a blue for a creature flying homunculus mutant, and it has Adept 1. This one's pretty simple to say. It's an alright draft card. The fact that it's a 2 free flyer for free is good, and the fact that you can mana sink into it to make it a free 4 flyer, that's actually pretty good. And also the one thing to keep in mind with Adept, you can Adept at your opponent's step as well. So you can use Adept as a semi-combat trick, which is something to consider about. And the opponent will probably have to be considerate of well as that, so it might make trading more efficient for you. But overall, I think this is just a really fine limited card. I don't know if it will see constructed play, personally. Next up, Sigana, Utopian Speaker. 2 green and a blue for a legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. When Utopian Speaker enters the battlefield, if you control another creature with a +1/+1 counter on it, draw a card. It has Adept 4, so if you spend the 6 mana, you can put 4 counters on it, make it an 8/8. And then each creature you control with +1/+1 counter on it has Trample. Wait, what? Yeah, I think this card is potentially very powerful and constructed. The factor that it's a Merfolk is very considerate because Merfolk have been trying to be a thing in the previous metas, and they have counter interactions such as with Deep Root Warrior and such, so... Yeah, and the factor that if they have those counters on it, they can have Trample, that is really powerful. Oh, and the fact that when it enters the battlefield, it allows you to draw a card if you have a creature with a counter on it, that's really good. The fact that it can become an 8/8 itself with Trample is very powerful. Yeah, this will at least be tried and constructed. I could see that. As whether or not it will see constructed play, yeah, it's definitely going to be tried out because many people have been trying to make the Merfolk deck work, and this is a decent top end to the Merfolk deck, so I could see it. As for limited play, yeah, this is an absolute bomb. You'll play this in limited, no sweat about that. It's a pack one, pick one. And in constructed, I see the potential, but it could also be easily hated out. I could see that right off the bat. Next up, we get a common of the set, a black-white Orzhov Karla's Imperious Oligarch. Vigilance 2-1 with Afterlife 1. Honestly, it's just a perfect limited card. You will pay 2 mana for a Piker, which is what it is, a 2-1. With Vigilance, that's very powerful, and the fact that when it dies, it gives yourself a Spirit. It's a really good card. I don't know if you'll see proper play, but in Limited, it will see a lot of play in Limited. For Constructed, maybe if the right Aristocrat decks form due to this card, but I could also see it being very weak because the fact of the stats alone, so we'll wait and see. Next up, we get a really cool Orzhov card, which is Type Taker, 1 and a white with Afterlife 1. It's a 2-1 soldier, so it's a piker, but it has the ability that during your turn, spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast, and abilities your opponent's activates cost 1 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. So this is, as we all know, this is a hate bear, and hate bears have the potential to be very powerful in the right metas. So yeah, this will probably see play. It'll definitely be tested with in Modern and Legacy, but it's most likely most will see play in Standard. In Limited, it'll be alright because the fact that it's a 2-1 that generates a Spirit and helps pretty much if the opponent is working on like instant activation plans and such, it pretty much hates out that during your turn, which is nice. So it might just see play there. And overall, I think that's all the cards I reviewed. Like, the ones I reviewed beforehand were the Spectacle cards, which, as we mentioned before, I'll just go through these really quick since I already talked about these, but I do want to update my opinion on them. Wrath of Demon. Just really, overall, just a good draft card. The fact that you can pay it for Spectacle to get the opponent discard ability is nice. I don't know if we'll see like any constructed play, maybe in EDH if the Rakdos Demon Lord EDH deck is a thing. Who knows, maybe. Ritz, Made Reveler. 2 mana for a 2-2, Spectacle 4. If it enters the battlefield, discard a card or draw a card. If the Spectacle cost was paid, instead discard your hand and draw 3 cards. Honestly, really good Spectacle card. The fact that it can enter the battlefield and just cycle itself is really good. And the factor that if you want to wait for the Spectacle cost, spend the Spectacle cost to restock your hand, that's a really powerful card. It will see constructed play. Next up, Mortify. This one's pretty simple too. It's 1 an Orzhov, instant, destroy target creature or enchantment. This will see play, especially in Chromatic Black control decks or even Orzhov-style control decks. Just the ability for unconditional removal for creatures or enchantments is very powerful, especially in a meta with a lot of powerful enchantments, slash also like cards like Search for Escanta and such, so keep that in mind. Growth Spire, green and a blue, for an instant, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield with very gorgeous set mechanic art. This is a card I really want to see in Simic colors. This is a really cool card. I kind of want to interact this with Thousand Year Storm and such, but overall, it's just a really powerful card. The fact you can use it for, in a sense, to do semi-ramp is very powerful. Keep it in mind, you will see this card see play. I would be surprised if it didn't. Gate Colossus, 8 mana for an 8/8. This spell costs 1 less for each cast for each gate you control. Gate Colossus can be blocked by a creature with power 2 or less. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you may put Gate Colossus from your graveyard on the top of your library. Honestly, just a really good limited card. But I could see this potentially somebody try to do a Jank Brew of this in Constructed. I could see it. But most likely, it's just a really good limited card. Next up, Simic Ascendancy. Green and a blue. Enchantment. 1 green and a blue. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature control. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters I'll put on a creature control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. Honestly, this card is decent and limited. In Constructed, it might see play, especially if the decks like Merfolk with counters are a thing. I do see this more play, though, in EDH still. Especially with stuff like, what's her name? The one that proliferates as her as her end of the turn ability that I always forget the name of. People will probably mention it in the comments, but yeah, in those commander decks that have counter matter synergies, they probably will see a lot more benefit with Simic Ascendancy than, say, in Constructed. But still, we are getting a lot of dead cards and counter interactions, so it might see play. Next up, Rakdos Fire Leer. Black, black, red, red for a human rogue, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to a target opponent, and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature or a planeswalker. Honestly, really good card. It probably will see play, especially if a Rakdos aggro deck is a thing. Just the fact that it can target a creature or a planeswalker does make it versatile, and as well as deal damage to your opponent. That's really good, especially if we have any abilities to like duplicate the creature, like with Helm of the Host and such, or maybe even Flicker-like synergies. That's something to consider. Overall, really great limited card, and it will probably see constructed play in some decks. Next up, Ravnica, Azorius Renegade, blue and a white for a legendary creature human soldier. It's a 2/2 with each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. This card is absurd. This card is a really powerful hate bearer that they provided in Azorius colors. The fact is that it hates out ramp decks that ramp using enchantments or mana rocks is very significant. And also in Modern, this hates out Motzes. This hates out a lot of Cheerio-style artifact stats, which might hamper Clark Clan Ironworks and such. And in Legacy, that's where this card is ridiculously absurd. The fact that it hates out all the Motzes, all the cheap 0-mana cards that are played in Legacy, and even some that are played in Modern, such as like the Path of Negation, or whatever the name of the one, Path of Negation, that's what it is, and stuff like that. This card is very powerful. It will see play in multiple formats, potentially. It's just a really good card. Next up is the Biobots promo, the Haunt of Hightower, 4 black black for a legendary creature vampire, flying lifelink. Whenever it attacks, the defending player discards a card, and whatever card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. Free. Honestly, it's just going to be a fun commander card to toy with, but I highly doubt it will see constructed play. It's a 6 mana free. It has some really cool abilities, don't get me wrong, but it is prone to a lot of removal. And even with what we've seen from the set, we have getting a lot of competitive flyers that makes this card a little bit Yeah, pretty much Next up, in the last card, but definitely not the worst, this one's actually really good. Light Up the Stage, 2 and a red for sorcery, uncommon, spectacle, 1 red. So if you deal damage to your opponent, you can cast this for 1 red mana. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. This card is really good. This card interacts a lot well with Experimental Frenzy, and just the factor that in the right burn decks, this is just in some instances, 1 mana, draw 2 cards. This card is silly. It's going to see a lot of standard play. Get ready. You're going to probably be annoyed by this card by the end of standard. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. And overall, that is all the cards that have been revealed so far. I'll catch up with the other cards in the next few days, just catching my eye on them and any that I missed that happened today and such. Overall, I do want to give credit to the site that I decided to review the cards out of, which is Scryfall. It's a site that I've been liking a lot more the more I've seen it and just see their interactive and such. It's a really cool website. I'd say give it a shot. It definitely shows you some really good statistics and such. Give it a whirl. You might actually like it a lot. And overall, I also like the fact that they try to give credit to the sources of whoever revealed the cards, which is actually really cool. Nevertheless, that's all the cards that have been reviewed so far. I think I'll just cover for today. I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out.